welcome. As we get ready for this wonderful program, please take this opportunity to turn off or silence your cell phone. And I also would like to welcome everybody and invite you after the program to a wonderful reception that will be held up in our gallery that has an exquisite show running right now. But right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Judy Dunn, who, along with Susie Solomon, is co-chair of the Stoddard Art Lecture Committee. She is also a past Friends President and Board President, and although not currently on the board, Judy is currently a member of the Advisory Board. Judy.
Wow, this is so wonderful, and we just hope the fire marshal doesn't like Rembrandt or something, I don't know. At any rate, welcome to our first annual Stoddard Art Lecture. You may ask, why Art Lecture? Why call it the Stoddard Art Lecture? Well, last year, about this time, a donor approached us with an opportunity. Pat Stoddard, who is the donor's very good friend, was celebrating a significant birthday. And this donor wanted to make a lasting gift to Pat that would speak to the kind of person that she is: intelligent, curious, artistic, and a true lifelong learner. Pat and her husband Hud have long been friends and active advocates of our New Canaan Library. So the donor knew that this was the perfect place to honor them both. Pat was on the library board from 1988 to 1996 and was responsible for growing the annual appeal and developing the process of fundraising that in part is still used today. HUD has been a driving force dedicated to the establishment and the ongoing success of the Salant and Atwood lectures, two of our most popular programs. What wonderful examples for all of us to try and follow. Our donor presented a unique opportunity to the library with this initial gift. Truly a fine way to honor both of the Stoddards, because all of you who know them know they are a team. And we know that this gift will be enduring, will benefit the community, and will allow others to honor the Stoddards as well. After very serious consideration of many ideas, the aha moment arrived, and the art lecture series was born. The committee determined the lecture series would be, and this is hard to say, the Stoddard Art Lecture Series, to enrich and broaden the community's understanding and enjoyment of the visual arts in all its forms. The Stoddard series is unique in that it is endowed. Once the fund reaches a certain point from contributions, the series will operate in perpetuity. It is indeed a lasting gift, honoring lifelong learning, benefiting others, and improving our New Canaan Library. When I asked Pat if there were anything that she would like me to say, she said, "Please ask everyone to give a thankful round of applause to this wonderfully generous, anonymous donor." And we would like Pat and HUD to have this, which is an invitation representing and commemorating this inaugural address. As you may have noticed, one of the committee members is David Findlay, who is fourth-generation gallery owner. The David Findlay Jr. Gallery opened in 1982 and specializes in 19th and century American art and sculpture. Recently, this gallery moved to larger quarters to better exhibit and represent its growing rosters of major American artists. The gallery continues to explore the rich history of American art, including artists of the Hudson River School, the American Impressionists, the Ashcan Group, the 1930s and 1940s American Modernists, the Indian space painters, abstract expressionists, as well as many important contemporary artists. We obviously knew the perfect person for our committee, and David Findlay knew the perfect person for this inaugural Stoddard Lecture. David.
Thank you, Judy. That's a very nice introduction. Wow, I'm so pleased that so many people are here. It's just great. It gives me really great pleasure to welcome Frank Robinson to New Canaan and also to the New Canaan Library for our initial Stoddard Lecture Series. Frank and I have known each other for almost 20 years. Frank came to Cornell 19 years ago as director of the Johnson Museum, and I've served on his board, and I've gotten to know him quite well over the years. Unfortunately for Cornell, Frank retired from his position last June, but in the 19 years that he was at the museum, he really did a masterful job in growing the museum from a really kind of insignificant college museum to one that I would say is in the top tier of university and college art museums. And Frank was able, in my sense, was able to accomplish this as a result of having a number of skills that are particularly ideal for a museum director. First, he is a widely accepted scholar of art history. He's a real generalist, but he's particularly known for his expertise in Dutch 17th century art. Then he has wonderful people skills. As director of the museum, he has traveled all over the United States, meeting Cornellians and getting their support for the museum. And as a result, he's really put Cornell in the minds of the Cornell alumni. And finally, he's an excellent business manager. So he has the financial ability to keep the museum on a straight financial path. I've often thought that Frank would be an excellent college president, but I don't think he wants to undertake that at this stage in his career. Frank was born in Providence, Rhode Island. He went to Harvard and earned his PhD in art history with his thesis in Dutch 17th century art. After Harvard, he spent 10 years at Dartmouth first and then Williams. And at Williams, he was he was director of the Williams Art Museum. And then Rhode Island School of Design, better known as, or often known as RISD, attracted him to be the director of its art museum, where he stayed for 13 years. RISD has a very fine collection of American 19th and early 20th century paintings. Finally, Cornell, in 1992, Cornell convinced him to come up to Ithaca to direct its museum. So in summary, Frank has enjoyed a very successful career in the art museum field. So with that introduction, please join me in welcoming Frank Robinson to our library for what I'm sure will be a fascinating lecture, Rembrandt, The Intimate World of a Genius.
Thank you very much. Can we go back to? Thank you. Thank you. Dave forgot to mention that I don't know anything about technology. Okay, one more. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Dave is the David Findlay Gallery is a famous gallery that keeps the flag flying in so many ways for especially early 20th century American art. And Mimi and Dave together have been so helpful. I also want to thank Judy for her nice words, and Alice Knapp and Cindy Lay, wherever they are, and who work here, of course, and who've been very, very helpful. Particularly want to thank the Stoddards for inspiring this wonderful gift from the anonymous donor, which is a marvelous thing to have happen. And I know I'm particularly happy to hear about endowment because, as Dave knows, I'm a bug about endowment. Endowed things are there forever. They're tremendously helpful to the institution because you can count on them, you can plan, and it's really very important. So many thanks to the two of you and the anonymous donor. If you're interested, I presume you're interested in Rembrandt. If you're interested, the Bruce Museum has just opened, literally last night, a wonderful exhibition in Greenwich of Rembrandt drawings, and I strongly recommend you're going. I know the drawings in the collection. It's all from the George Abrams collection, which is the most important private collection of 17th century Dutch drawings in the world, and he lives in Boston, outside Boston, and I think you'd love it. Well, here is Rembrandt. This is what I thought I might do is just concentrate just on Rembrandt's etchings. I mean, he produced 3,000 drawings, 300 etchings, 200 or 300 paintings that survive. So to compress all of that into a short hour is difficult. So I thought I'd just concentrate on the etchings because the etchings are amazing. These 280, 290 etchings that he did are so intimate, so personal, and such a revelation of his inner life. And I think we all love Rembrandt for that aspect of his work, but actually it's a revolutionary aspect. He had a very new conception, not just of etchings, which were previously just largely copies of paintings used to publicize the paintings, or very, very public, not very personal statements. So he had a new conception, not just of etchings, but of art itself, a very modern statement, and that's really extraordinary. Here he is in 1639, age 33. He comes from what we would call, I think, the lower middle class in the little town, university town of Leiden, which is just south of Amsterdam. And he goes in age 25 or so, a few years before this, he goes up to Amsterdam, which at that point was a great city. The Dutch were just achieving their independence from the Spanish, and they had this worldwide network of trading routes and colonies, whether it's New Amsterdam here in New York, of course, New Amsterdam and up the Hudson River, but also in eastern Brazil, in Cape of Good Hope, in Indonesia, the vast area, thousands of islands, and then they were the only foreigners allowed to trade with Japan for a couple of centuries. So it was an amazing outburst of energy and exploration, and not just commercial, but also artistic, also scientific, just on every level. It was an extraordinary thing. And so he's moved, and the center of it is Amsterdam. Amsterdam is more important than London at that point, and very prosperous. And he comes to it at about age 26, 25, 26, nobody's quite sure just when, but around 1631, 32, and 7 years later he does this amazing work. It's his most famous self-portrait etching at age 33. He's born in 1606, dies in 1669, and he is already very successful, very prosperous. He's married into the aristocracy. He comes from a lower middle class background. He's married into to a fairly wealthy aristocracy. The the cousin of his dealer, interestingly enough. And he's just bought a nice house, which you can visit when you go to Amsterdam still, which actually was the ruin of him financially. He was a terrible handler of money. And very litigious, and sued people left and right. Be that as it may, here is the man. This extraordinary image, because he's being pretentious. He is at age 33, which you see here. At age 33, he's very successful, and particularly his portraits, which was the main staple of 17th century Dutch art. And he's very successful, and you can sense that. And he's comparing himself with the old masters, not of the 17th century, but of the 16th century, of a century earlier. The clothing that he wears there, that sable overcoat or whatever you call it, cloak, and the beret, that has more to do with the 16th century, the 1500s, instead of the 1600s. He doesn't call himself Van Rijn. His whole name is Rembrandt van Rijn. He doesn't call himself Van Rijn, which everybody else does. He uses his first name. Why is that? Because that's what the old masters in Italy did. Leonardo da Vinci, everybody thinks of Leonardo. Michelangelo Buonarroti, everybody says Michelangelo. Raphael Sanzio, everybody says Raphael. Those old masters use the first name, so damn it, he's going to use the first name too. But within all that pretension, which you certainly see there in this wonderful statement, he can't help but be honest. He can't help. His hair is frizzy. Here, he's not smiling. He's frowning, and you rarely see him smiling in his scores of self-portraits. So this is so even in this presentation, so to speak, of himself at his most successful, there is an honesty there and a reality, a realism that is really quite wonderful. Well, realism is very much part of what he's about. And I'm going to show you a few things which I hesitate to show you, but nevertheless, they're part of who he is. Who he is. Here is the Good Samaritan parable. He does, as you know, many religious scenes. He himself is not quite sure what he was, but he was presumably a Calvinist. But he moved when he moved to a new home, a house in the Jewish ghetto. He became fascinated by Jewish culture, that kind of thing. So he's very open to other things. He's always learning. At any rate, here he is at age 27 in 1633. At age 27, and here's the story of the Good Samaritan who's found this person who's been robbed on the roadway and is paying for him to be put up at the inn. And it's a wonderful movement, a very Baroque diagonal going from foreground right up to background left, and then off again into the background. But look where it begins. It begins. Can you see that? It begins with a dog defecating, and he highlights it. I mean, you can't escape that one. And he highlights that in a religious scene, and this really disturbed people, as you can imagine. And here's this 27-year-old really, slapping us all in the face. A wonderful work. I'm sorry if you can't see it, but don't worry, we'll see some other things shortly. Okay. Here is these etchings. An etching is made by, you take a copper plate. In this case, the copper plate is about 3 inches high. So it's amazing how it expands that way, enlarges that way. He takes a copper plate and covers that copper plate with a thin layer of acid-resistant wax. Once he's covered it with that copper plate with a thin layer of acid-resistant wax, he takes a needle and scratches the design through that thin layer of wax. When he scratched the design through the wax, he puts it into an acid bath. The acid bites into the plate where the needle has scratched the design. So, and then once the acid has done its work, the artist takes the plate out of the acid, takes off the acid-resistant wax, smears ink over it all, wipes the ink off, and the ink stays in the lines that have been bitten into by the acid, and it was originally scratched in. Now, why go through all of that? And the reason is, why go, it's a very complicated business, and you're very dependent on the wax or the rosin covering the plate doing well, and the consistency of the copper and the consistency of the acid. And there are many, many steps in there which are complicated and required some technical expertise on Rembrandt's part, and he had to learn it from a particular artist. But why go through all of that? Because you can do 50 or 75 impressions, as they're called, copies. So it's a multiple. And throughout his life, at least until the late 50s when he stopped making prints, throughout his life, this was a moneymaker for him. People have this vision of Rembrandt as being a poor, neglected artist in his later years. Not at all. He was famous in his own time. He was famous all over Western Europe. Even in the last year of his life, he sold his whole stock, his whole inventory of etchings to a man, Don Rufo, a nobleman in Sicily. So all the way down there. So I mean, he was well known. And there were people who collected every single one of his prints. You couldn't really do that anymore because there just aren't that many. But he left. But nevertheless, many of them are in museums, obviously. There are about 30 in the Johnson Museum. So he was very, very successful. Here is this extraordinary image. What an amazing image of this man, of this tramp, basically, this tramp urinating. Now, it's shocking in itself. It may be shocking in itself, but there was an undertone to it. In the 17th century, there was a basically permanent underclass called the Grauw, G-R-A-U-W. And the Grauw were people without a home. And they were required. They couldn't just settle in Amsterdam or Leiden or whatever. They were required to move. They could only stay 3 days in one city, that kind of thing. And they were required to move, and they had no rights, etc. And obviously no money. And so here is, and Rembrandt did many images of these people who have no place to go to the bathroom of their own. Here's another one that's in a way more shocking. Of a woman also going